A tide of silver-robed reptiles crashed to their knees as the human spacecraft sliced through Kazonia's violet skies. Jake Hicks, Earth's most seasoned diplomat, emerged into a sea of bowed heads, their scaled brows pressed to purple sands in eerie unison. Hundreds of aliens knelt in perfect synchronicity, still as stone, silent as the stars. Jake's grip tightened on his pulse pistol as a lone figure rose from the throng. Wazin, high priest of the Kazan, towered 2 heads taller than Jake, his elongated snout flashing rows of serrated teeth as he spoke. "Rejoice, children of Kazonia, the celestial messenger has arrived, descending from the cosmic whirlwind as foretold, an ancient prophecy fulfilled." Wazin thrust a clawed finger toward a bewildered Jake. "Behold the harbinger of Kazonia's ascension. Kneel before the cosmic emissary and pledge unwavering obedience, as ordained by sacred scripture." As the Kazan masses rose in a silver tide, something felt wrong to Jake. Unquestioning obedience? Blind worship? The word sent chills down his spine. But with the future of human-Kazan relations in his hands, Jake had no choice but to play along. For now. Wazin ushered Jake into Zivex, capital of the Kazan. Pulsing energy conduits snaked up soaring towers of glinting alloy, bathing the sprawling metropolis in an ethereal emerald glow. In the Grand Palace, negotiations commenced between Jake and the Kazan leadership, a circle of wizened priests draped in shimmering robes. Just as progress seemed imminent, an explosion rocked the palace. Through billowing smoke strode Zoltar, notorious leader of the rebel Crux faction. Hefting a crackling energy spear, Zoltar leveled the humming point at Jake's heart. "Heresy! The human is a false prophet, come to lead Kazonia astray. We Crux will never submit to this charlatan." As the throne room erupted into chaos, Jake dove behind a pillar, dodging sizzling energy blasts. Pulse pistol firing, he knew diplomacy was dead. To forge peace, he'd have to unravel the ancient prophecy's secrets himself, before Kazonia erupted in an apocalyptic holy war. As the rebel attacks intensified, Zivex convulsed with chaos. Energy blasts sizzled through smoldering streets as Crux insurgents clashed with loyalist forces. In the Grand Palace, an ashen-faced Wazin burst into Jake's chambers, his robes singed and tattered. "The rebels have breached the outer defenses," Wazin panted, locking the door behind him. "Zoltar's assassins are hunting you." Jake checked the charge on his pulse pistol. "Then it's time I took this fight to the people." Venturing into the war-torn streets, Jake strode toward the great plaza, his voice booming over the tumult. He spoke of the prophecies, of the path to peace, his words painting visions of a united Kazonia. Huddled masses listened, reptilian eyes widening with dawning hope. But Zoltar's forces struck like vipers. Energy bolts rained down, scattering the crowd. Jake dove for cover, returning fire as Wazin's elite guard clashed with the rebels in a blaze of pulse blasts and crackling energy spears. In the chaos, Zoltar's amplified voice cut through the din, challenging Jake to a public debate. The fate of Kazonia would be decided not by arms, but by words. The grand amphitheater was packed to the rafters, thousands of Kazan watching with held breath as Jake and Zoltar took the stage. Zoltar spoke of purity, of preserving the old ways. Jake countered with visions of progress, of adaptation. Then came the bombshell. Jake revealed the prophecy's true origin, the long-ago deception by the enigmatic Quell. Gasps rippled through the crowd, shock and confusion etched on reptilian faces. Zoltar pounced, twisting Jake's revelation to his own ends. Riots erupted, the amphitheater devolving into a maelstrom of fists and pulse blasts. Jake and Wazin fled, racing through shadow-cloaked streets as Zivex tore itself apart. In a deep bunker beneath the palace, Jake pored over ancient tomes and crackling energy maps, desperate for an answer. Kazonia teetered on the brink, torn between an uncertain future and the comforting lies of the past. Jake knew he needed a miracle. But with Zoltar's forces growing by the hour and the Kazan's faith shattered, even miracles seemed in short supply. The fate of a world hung in the balance as the celestial messenger plotted his next move, the specter of holy war looming over all. In the depths of the palace bunker, Jake hunched over a flickering holodisplay, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ancient Kazan texts scrolled across the screen, their meanings obscured by the passage of time and the Quell's cryptic manipulations. Wazin burst into the room, his robe swishing. "I've found something," he hissed, inputting a command into the holodisplay. A star map bloomed to life, a pulsing dot marking a distant moon. A hidden Quell archive, mentioned only in the most esoteric texts. If the truth behind their deception lies anywhere, it's there. Jake nodded grimly. "Then that's our next stop. But we're running out of time. Zoltar's forces grow stronger by the day." As if on cue, the bunker shuddered, dust sifting from the ceiling. Muffled explosions echoed from above, a reminder of the chaos engulfing Zyvex. Jake and Wazin exchanged a tense glance. Sneaking out of the palace in a cloaked shuttle, they made a harrowing journey to the remote moon, dodging Crux patrols and ionic storms. The Quell archive was a looming ziggurat of black metal, pockmarked by aeons of meteor impacts. Inside, they found a trove of holographic records and a chilling revelation. The Quell had manipulated dozens of primitive cultures across the galaxy, seeding prophecies and steering their development for inscrutable purposes. "But why?" Wazin whispered, his eyes wide. Jake shook his head. "We may never know, but we have to stop Zoltar from leading your people further astray." Returning to Kazonia, they found a world transformed. Zoltar, now styling himself supreme leader, had instituted a brutal regime of isolationism and oppression. Non-believers were being rounded up and re-educated, while all contact with the outside galaxy was severed. Desperate, Jake and Wazin reached out to Zara, a high-ranking Crux official who had shown glimmers of doubt during Jake's earlier debates. Convincing her to join their cause was no easy feat, but as she witnessed the cruel excesses of Zoltar's rule firsthand, her perseverance hardened. Together they began a clandestine resistance. Whispered conversations in shadowed alleys and encrypted transmissions beamed into the night. Jake pored over the prophecies with fresh eyes, seeking a new interpretation that allowed for change and growth. Wazin used his influence to shield their nascent movement, cloaking their activities under the guise of religious observances. But Zoltar's paranoia grew by the day, and his crackdowns more severe. Tensions reached a breaking point when Zoltar made a stunning announcement. The ultimate proof of the prophecy's truth would soon be revealed. On the 1000th anniversary of the prophecy's inception, a mythical artifact known as the Celestial Crown would materialize in the Grand Temple, granting divine authority to whoever wore it. Realization dawned on Jake with icy clarity. The crown was surely another Quell deception, a final test for the Kazon people, and in that moment, a plan took shape. A plan that would shake the very foundations of Kazon society. On the fated day, thousands of Kazon gathered in the temple square, a sea of silver robes and chittering anticipation. Zoltar rode in on a grand palanquin, his eyes gleaming with avaricious triumph as he approached the temple steps. Jake, disguised in the humble robes of a temple acolyte, watched from the shadows as a beam of blinding light pierced the heavens, bathing the pedestal at the top of the steps in radiant glory. There, shimmering into existence like a mirage given form, was the celestial crown. The crowd held its collective breath as Zoltar reached for the crown, his claws trembling with eagerness. But at the last second, a figure darted from the assembled acolytes and snatched the crown away. Zoltar whirled, a snarl twisting his features as Jake held the crown aloft, his voice ringing out over the suddenly silent square. "Behold the truth, children of Kazonia. This is no divine relic, but a deception wrought by the Quell, a mere hologram, designed to mislead and control." Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the crowd as Jake donned the crown himself. Gasps turned to cries of astonishment as the crown shimmered and morphed, reshaping itself to fit his head perfectly, damning proof of its true nature. Zoltar howled in rage, drawing a crackling plasma blade from his robes and charging at Jake. But before he could close the distance, Zara and her rebel allies emerged from the crowd, energy weapons leveled at the Supreme Leader's heart. "It's over, Zoltar," Zara growled. "Your lies have been exposed. Step down or face the consequences." The Kazan masses stirred, confusion giving way to anger as the scope of Zoltar's deception sank in. Some began to hiss and boo, hurling accusations at their once revered leader. Zoltar's eyes darted left and right, seeking an escape, but he was surrounded. In a final bold strategy, he lunged at Jake, plasma blade sizzling through the air. Jake stumbled back, the crown tumbling from his head as he fumbled for his pulse pistol. But before Zoltar could strike, a searing energy blast caught him square in the chest, hurling him back against the temple steps. Wiesen stood at the foot of the stairs, an ionic blaster raised in trembling hands, smoke curling from its barrel. The high priest's face was a mask of anguish and willpower. As Zoltar slumped to the ground, his life bleeding out onto the sacred steps, the crowd erupted into chaos. Some wailed in despair, others cheered the tyrant's downfall. Zara and her rebels struggled to maintain order as the Kazon people grappled with the shattering of their most cherished beliefs. Jake retrieved the fallen crown, holding it up once more. "The time for lies is over," he declared, his voice heavy with conviction. "The Quell deceived you, but you have a choice. Cling to the comforting fictions of the past, or forge a new path into the future, a path of truth, of progress, of unity." The square fell silent, every eye fixed on the alien emissary who had upended their world. And as Jake met their gazes, he saw the first tentative stirrings of a new dawn in their reptilian eyes. The road ahead would be long and fraught with uncertainty. Rebuilding a society from the ashes of shattered faith would test the Kazan to their very core. But with the crown's false promise exposed and Zoltar's iron grip broken, there was at last a chance for change. Jake turned to Wiesen and Zara, a grim smile on his lips. "We have work to do." The trio ascended the temple steps, the eyes of history upon them. The future of Kazonia hung in the balance. But for the first time in generations, that future was unwritten, a blank page waiting to be filled by the choices and sacrifices of the brave. As the first whispers of change stirred on the hot Kazonian wind, Jake felt the weight of destiny settle upon his shoulders. But he would not face the trials ahead alone. With allies forged in the crucible of revolution at his side, and the resilient spirit of the Kazon to guide them, anything was possible. Even peace, even hope, even a new dawn for a world too long trapped by the shadows of a lie. Jake's fingers tightened around the celestial crown, its metallic surface cool against his skin. The temple square stretched before him, a sea of silver-robed Kazan frozen in stunned silence. Zoltar's body lay crumpled at the base of the steps, a grim reminder of the violence that had brought them to this moment. Taking a deep breath, Jake raised the crown high above his head. "People of Kazonia," he called out, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "I came to your world with a purpose, but what I found here changed everything." Reptilian eyes locked onto him, a mixture of fear, confusion, and desperate hope etched on scaled faces. Jake continued, "The Quell, those beings you revered as gods, were not divine. They were advanced aliens who seeded prophecies across primitive worlds as a test." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Jake pressed on. "The test was simple. When confronted with evidence that your beliefs were artificial, could you reject blind faith and embrace reason?" Murmurs of disbelief and anger began to swell. Jake raised a hand, silencing them. "I understand your pain. Everything you've built your society on has been a lie. But in that lie lies an opportunity, a chance to evolve beyond the limitations of dogma and join the greater galactic community as equals." He gestured to the crown. This was the final deception, a holographic trick meant to cement false authority. But you are better than this. You are capable of so much more. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then a rustle of movement caught Jake's eye. Wiesen stepped forward, his weathered face a mask of conflicting emotions. The high priest hesitated for a heartbeat, then slowly sank to one knee before Jake. "We have been blind," Wiesen intoned, his voice thick with emotion. "But no longer. Guide us, celestial messenger, to this new dawn you speak of. One by one, other Kazan leaders followed suit. The matriarch of the southern clans, the master of the Ionic forges, even members of Zoltar's inner circle, their eyes wide with the dawning realization of their folly. A commotion erupted at the edge of the square. Zoltar, somehow still clinging to life, staggered to his feet. "Traitors!" he shrieked, brandishing his plasma blade. "You would forsake everything for this alien's lies?" The fallen leader lurched forward, his weapon crackling with deadly energy. But before he could take 3 steps, a barrage of pulse fire lit up the air. Jake's human escort materialized from cloaked positions, their weapons trained on Zoltar. The Kazan rebel crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror finally at an end. In the days that followed, Kazonia underwent a radical transformation. The theocratic rule of the past gave way to the foundations of a constitutional republic. Jake worked tirelessly alongside Wazin, Zara, and other progressive leaders to guide the transition. The Quell ruins became a hub of activity as archaeologists and scientists from across the galaxy flocked to study the ancient deception. Jake stood at the entrance to what was once a sacred site, now reimagined as a museum of cautionary history. Wazin approached, his new robes of office a striking contrast to the simple garb of the past. "The first ships from the Interstellar Alliance will be arriving soon," he said, a note of nervous excitement in his voice. Jake nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Your people are ready, Wazin. You've come so far in such a short time." As they walked toward the central spaceport, Jake marveled at the changes already visible in Zvex. Banners proclaiming devotion to prophecy had been replaced by displays of scientific achievement. The oppressive pall of religious fervor had lifted, replaced by a palpable sense of curiosity and hope. The spaceport plaza was packed with Kazan of all castes and clans, united in their anticipation of this historic moment. A sleek diplomatic cruiser touched down, its hull gleaming in the Kazonian sun. As the ship's ramp lowered, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Wazin, flanked by the newly elected Kazan Leadership Council. "It is time," Wazin said softly. Jake nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. He stepped forward, facing the assembled Kazan dignitaries. Then, mirroring their first encounter so many months ago, he slowly sank to one knee. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Jake raised his eyes, meeting Wazin's gaze. "On behalf of humanity and the Interstellar Alliance, I greet you as equals. May our peoples forge a bond of mutual respect and understanding that will last for generations to come." Wazin's eyes shimmered with emotion as he extended a clawed hand. Jake grasped it firmly, allowing himself to be pulled to his feet. As they shook hands, sealing this momentous alliance, the crowd erupted in cheers. The path ahead would not be easy. Centuries of ingrained beliefs don't vanish overnight. But as Jake looked out over the sea of faces, Kazan and human alike, he saw something that filled him with hope. The first glimmers of a truly unified galactic future. The Kazonian sun beat down on Jake as he stood atop the newly constructed Interstellar Alliance headquarters in Zvex. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he gazed out over the sprawling cityscape, marveling at how much had changed in just a few short months. Gone were the oppressive religious iconography and propaganda that had once dominated every corner. In their place stood gleaming research facilities, bustling marketplaces filled with off-world goods, and public spaces where Kazan from all castes mingled freely. Jake's comlink chirped, interrupting his reverie. "Diplomat Hammond," Wazin's gravelly voice crackled through the speaker, "we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." Frowning, Jake made his way to the central command center. As the doors slid open, he was greeted by a scene of barely controlled chaos. Kazan and human analysts huddled around holographic displays, their faces etched with concern. "What's going on?" Jake asked, striding towards Wazin. The former high priest's scales had taken on a pale, sickly hue. "We've lost contact with the Outer Rim outpost," he said, his voice tight. "And there's more. 3 supply convoys have vanished without a trace in the past week alone." Jake's stomach clenched. "Zoltar?" Wazin shook his head. "We don't think so. The attacks are too coordinated, too precise. This feels different. Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A young human analyst called out, "Sir, we're detecting multiple explosions across the southern quadrant." Holographic displays flickered to life, showing scenes of devastation. Jake watched in horror as plumes of smoke rose from research centers, communication relays, and civilian gathering places. "This doesn't make sense," Jake muttered, his mind racing. "Why target civilian infrastructure? It's almost as if—" His words were cut short by a deafening explosion that rocked the entire building. Klaxons wailed as emergency systems engaged. "We're under attack," Wazin shouted, already moving towards the emergency evacuation protocols. Jake's instincts screamed danger. This was no random terrorist attack. The precision, the timing, it reeked of a carefully orchestrated plan. As they rushed through the corridors, Jake's comlink chirped again. An encrypted message flashed across the screen. "Meet at abandoned temple. Crucial information. Come alone." Jake hesitated for a split second before making his decision. "Wezin," he called out, "get everyone to safety. I need to check on something." Before the Kazan leader could protest, Jake was gone, slipping away through a side entrance and into the chaos-filled streets of Zevex. The journey to the abandoned temple on the outskirts of the city was a harrowing one. Jake ducked through alleys and dodged panicked crowds, his pulse pistol clutched tightly in his hand. As he approached the crumbling edifice, a chill ran down his spine. Something felt terribly wrong. Jake cautiously entered the temple, his eyes straining in the dim light. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. A rustling sound came from behind a fallen pillar. Jake whirled, weapon raised, only to find himself face to face with a group of armed Kazan rebels. "We've been waiting for you, celestial messenger," one of them sneered, the title dripping with contempt. Before Jake could react, a stun bolt caught him square in the chest. As consciousness faded, he caught a glimpse of a towering figure emerging from the shadows, decidedly not Kazan. Jake awoke to searing pain. He found himself bound to a cold metal surface, his vision swimming as he tried to focus. "Ah, the architect of our little setback finally awakens," a voice purred. It was cultured, almost melodious, yet filled with malice. A face swam into view, humanoid but with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. Jake's blood ran cold as realization dawned. "You're Quell," he managed to croak. The being's lips curled into a cruel smile. "How observant. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Arak, Supreme Commander of the Quell Imperium, and you, Jake Hammond, have become quite the thorn in our side." Jake's mind raced, trying to process this shocking revelation. But the prophecy, the test... Arak laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. "Oh, you simple creature. Did you really think it was all so straightforward? The Kazan were never meant to pass your little test. They were meant to remain precisely where they were, a pawn in a game spanning millennia." As Arak spoke, Jake became aware of the Kazan rebels arrayed behind him. Their eyes were glassy, unfocused. Mind control, Jake realized with growing horror. "You see," Arak continued, pacing around Jake's prone form, "the Kazan are but one piece in a vast cosmic puzzle. We've been shaping civilizations across this sector for eons, all in preparation for the celestial convergence." Jake's confusion must have shown on his face, for Arak's smile widened. "Ah, but you don't know about that, do you? No matter, you won't live long enough for it to be of consequence." With a lazy flick of his wrist, Arak produced a wickedly curved blade. "Your meddling has forced us to accelerate our plans. Kazonia will burn, and from its ashes we will forge the instrument of our ultimate victory." As the blade descended towards Jake's chest, a single thought blazed through his mind. He had to warn Earth. Somehow, someway, he had to get a message out. With a burst of desperate strength, Jake twisted, causing Arak's blade to slice into his arm instead of his heart. Blood poured from the wound, but Jake barely felt it. He kicked out, catching Arak off guard and sending the Quell commander stumbling back. In the moment of confusion, Jake's fingers found the hidden compartment in his boot. A single press activated the emergency beacon, a last-ditch distress signal that would be picked up by Alliance channels. Arak's face contorted with rage. "Kill him!" he snarled at the mind-controlled Kazan. As weapons were raised and energy bolts filled the air, Jake knew his chances of survival were slim. But as consciousness began to fade once more, a grim satisfaction settled over him. The message was sent. The alarm had been sounded. Now it was up to others to unravel the Quell's machinations and save not just Kazonia, but the entire galaxy from a threat beyond imagining.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.